Hello and welcome to the Center for Spiritually Integrated Arts, a Centers for Spiritual Living teaching center. I am Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson. I am the founder and the spiritual director. Now, as you are sitting there joining us, you may have questions, any number of questions, such as, who am I? How did I get here? Spiritually integrated arts means what exactly? What is a teaching center? Well, what is Centers for Spiritual Living? What is that? What does that even mean? Or New Thought, or religious science, or science of mind and spirit? You may have any number of questions about this specific community, about the parent organization, CSL, our philosophy, our teaching, our liberation theology. Any number of questions. Feel free to send an email. We look forward to connecting more and building our virtual community, our global community. And if you haven't connected yet on social media, feel free to do so. This is your invitation now. Also, did you know that all of our Sunday messages are archived on our YouTube channel? You can watch it anytime. Now, questions about anything, such as becoming a member. What does that mean? What does membership entail? And if you live somewhere far and already belong to a spiritual community, can you be a member of more than one? The simple answer is yes, you can. Just like you can shop at more than one grocery store, you can attend or be a member of more than one gym. We are building beloved community. So you can do both. You can be a member of both. You can be involved with both. That's what being in spiritual community means. So we welcome you. We invite you. We are so appreciative that you have found this community and that you have joined us today. We bless you. We love you. We welcome you. Live long and prosper. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of our Sunday message. Love you. Connect with you soon. Blessings. Namaste and greetings to week number 2 of August as we continue our discussion, our conversation about those taboo topics. And today's taboo topic, trauma. It is crucial that we begin to discuss this often taboo topic of trauma within our spiritual communities if if the mission is to support every individual's right to health, wholeness, and a grand rising. Very few people, if any, are actually immune from trauma, including individual experiences of abuse, adverse childhood experiences, poverty, medical trauma, the collective experiences of war, displacement, mass shootings, terror attacks, natural disasters, living through a pandemic, just to name a few. See, trauma can happen in a variety of ways. Trauma does happen in a variety of ways. Science of Mind and Spirit provides us a strong foundation of spiritual principles, applicable practices that support and facilitate healing. And yet, we must go beyond knowing the truth in spiritual mind treatment to applying a kind of trauma-informed science of mind and spirit, which acts in ways that promote a truly holistic healing, a holistic expression of wholeness and kindness, compassion, and support within our communities. Now, I'm specifically wearing my Pittsburgh Proud t-shirt today because a lot of the trauma that I have experienced in my life was a result of well, not because I lived in Pittsburgh, but occurred while I was living in Pittsburgh. Excuse me. And so Pittsburgh Proud could very easily become an acronym for Pittsburgh Pain, resistance, oppression, othering. Like we could go so there's this idea that trauma and pain and occurs in a great many ways. As Dr. Sean Ginwright says, we are all wounded and carry the shame and pain in ways that we aren't even aware of. We carry the shame and the pain and are unaware of it. Yet, we are not equipped with the skills or the awareness to heal this pain and this trauma. So first there's the idea that I don't even know that I'm hurt. And then there's the idea that if I did know, do I have the tools to move through the process of healing? He says most of us don't. So let's start with a basic general understanding of, well, what is trauma? Just in general, what does it mean when we refer to trauma? Just in general, trauma is, or a traumatic event is usually a single experience or an enduring experience or a repeated experience in which the individual is completely overwhelmed in their ability to cope or to integrate ideas and emotions that the experience involves. It involves a feeling of complete helplessness or hopelessness in the face of real or perceived threats. to one's life, a loved one, bodily integrity, sanity, safety, etc. There is a frequent violation of a person's familiar ideas about the world, about their human rights and dignity. It puts a person in a state of extreme, it's an extreme state of confusion, fear, worry, dread, insecurity. See, trauma is a wide and highly encompassing experience. And so we use terms like PTSD, hypervigilance, anxiety, worry. All of these things tie into the tapestry that is trauma. Various threads. Do you feel worried or anxious about the upcoming election? If it is that chronic gnawing, that's trauma. Do you feel when you hear a new hashtag about another mass shooting or another Black person or transgender woman of color is murdered, do you feel a certain, that's trauma. Now, trauma, there are various types of. There's physical trauma, emotional trauma, chronic or complex trauma. Now, I invite us that if we are going to step into this taboo topic and find out how do we apply science of mind and spirit to it in order to heal it and transform it, to be present to it, then we have to understand what it is and how it shows up. In what way have you experienced trauma? Do you know someone who has or is experiencing trauma? Because there are a variety of symptoms and consequences that show up from, as a result of trauma. Nightmares, various addictions, self-loathing. See, there's a great many ways that this thing called trauma shows up in our individual lives and experiences. Depression. So we're invited to say, so I'm experiencing these panic attacks, or I have trust issues. Is that connected to, is that because of some traumatic event that is impacting and influencing our lives that shows up as mistrust, that shows up as learning problems, that shows up as uncontrollable outbursts of anger? So I invite you, screen capture this or, show up to the Thursday night study group and really look at this and ask, do I experience any of these? And if so, might it be connected to some trauma? And even beyond that, how am I invited to move through the process of healing? And if it's not me and it's someone I care about and love, then how am I invited to understand their spiritual wholeness, wellness, and all that stuff, even while they are feeling depressed, even while they experience self-loathing? Because if we continue to bypass it and malpractice it and ignore it, then we're not really creating a world that works for all, because we're not really addressing the process of and the practice of healing. And so when Mark Nepo says, the truth is that telling heals, expressing what's on your mind and your heart heals, not just once, but as a way of being that filters in the heart of its debris. As a way of being that filters in the heart of its debris. So all of these experiences, all of these feelings get filtered through. But what do we do with it? Last week we talked about the importance of truly listening. Do we listen when people tell us they are in pain? Do we listen to such a degree that even when someone says, I'm good, I'm fine, that we actually hear that they're not? So if we're going to practice science of mind and spirit in a way that, really benefits, is really relevant to our communities and our peoples, then we have to understand that trauma-informed care can become trauma-informed spiritual care. And so we're invited to realize, to recognize, to respond, and then to resist re-traumatization. What are we invited to realize? What are we invited to recognize? Like, what is this? How does this, these 4 R's, how does this impact how we live, move, and have our beingness within this teaching of new thought, science of mind and spirit? How do I know the truth and realize? How do I know the truth and recognize? Once again, it's both and. We don't simply put on a happy face and pretend. That doesn't heal. So when they say trauma-informed care, what does it look like? It looks like language and communication. It looks like providing choices, etc. When you go through this, when you look at this on your own, change the language so that it applies to you in whatever way is relevant. For example, when you look under the first circle, language and communication, instead of it saying helpers use, swap it out and say, I use non-judgmental language. And I use empathetic language. I avoid making assumptions about an individual's past and their present experiences. I listen deeply. When it says providing choices, in healthcare settings, offering choices to patients. In spiritual communities and centers, offering choices to congregants can be empowering. So go through this and swap out the language that makes it more relevant, more personal to you and your spiritual community. Because trauma-informed spiritual care, trauma-informed relationships heal. It involves us being able to see, understand, acknowledge who and what the person is, what their experience has been or currently is, and how do we envelop and embrace them in the most loving, compassionate, healing, and supportive ways possible. So we don't simply say, oh, well, what's in your consciousness? Just pray, treat, and move your feet, and it'll all be good. Don't talk about that, because the law of attraction, if you talk about it, you bring about it. It's bad theology. It's actually trauma-inducing theology. Because when the person does the very thing you're inviting them to do and things don't change, it lumps even more guilt and shame upon them, where they wonder, why can't I get this right? What am I doing wrong? So trauma-informed spirituality becomes trauma-informed relationships. And it impacts and influences not just how we move through our spiritual communities, but how we move throughout the world, through our neighborhoods, jobs, etc. A trauma-informed approach in spirituality can help people reconcile difficult events with their beliefs and practices. It can provide comfort during times of distress. This approach can be based on the following principles, such as allowing for all emotions, honoring feelings and experiences, recognizing the impact and the influence of trauma, and prioritizing safety. It's important for us to understand this. So even in our personal relationships, do I honor what this person feels and what this person is or has experienced? Which means it has to go beyond, hey Ray, how you doing? What's up? I said, how are you doing? Oh, can't complain. It's not telling me how you are doing. How are you feeling? Oh, you really want to know? I wouldn't have asked otherwise. I mean, I feel fair. Can you say more about when you say you feel fair? What does that mean? Well, I mean, I could feel better. Well, what's going on that's causing you, right? So it's honoring the person's feelings and their experiences. It's actually engaging in. So when they say, well, there was this trauma, that say more. Well, it caused, say, like we're opening up to listen and truly see and recognize, giving them a safe space to bring the pain, the worry, the fear, the guilt, the shame. Because if we don't give them that space, we don't give them that, we're not giving them the capacity, we're not giving them the environment that nurtures their healing. And one place where we tend to do this in our spiritual communities. We are often referred to as a hugging people. So though we say we are welcoming and inclusive, we often expect others to fit into the culture and the status quo, our norms of the community, rather than us accepting them as they are. Many spiritual people proclaim that they are huggers. And so they'll reach for a stranger or a first-time visitor without that person's consent. This small act, while intended to be an invitation, it's intended to be loving. It can trigger people who have some form of trauma, sometimes to the point where they are uncomfortable returning to or attending a spiritual community. Are you a hugger? Is it okay if I hug you? Do you mind if I? And if they say, no, do not hug me, you honor, bow, elbow bump. You honor them where they are. That's the invitation. To be trauma informed in our spirituality, in our relationships, we must not only learn how to speak to one another in a way that is uplifting and supportive, but also to shift our community culture away from the status quo, where we are now willing to do something different than that which has been. This may mean always asking another person before hugging them. Ask if it's okay. Practice saying thank you to someone when they say no, regardless of the question. No. Do you want to volunteer? No. Thank you. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for answering. Thank you. Not pressuring people to volunteer, not pressuring them to be involved in groups, not guilting them into it or tithing. It's involved in our how do we implement policies and procedures that respond to racial, ethnic, cultural needs, inequities. How do we educate leaders? How do we educate people? How do we educate all of these folks within our spiritual community while also allowing folks to sit back and observe, to sit on the periphery and observe until such time as they feel comfortable stepping in and being involved. Being trauma informed, we not only invite people who have potentially never felt welcome in any spiritual community before, because we often hear from folks who have been attending for years. They're more comfortable being authentic and being vulnerable in our spiritual centers. But how do we create this energy of they may not feel welcomed or included? How do we ensure that they will? Even those people who may not think like or look like or dress like us. So last week when we mentioned someone who is in a wheelchair, or someone who is deaf, someone who speaks a different language, someone who supports whatever said candidate, how do we create an atmosphere where even that person feels welcome in? And in there is something that happens where there is shifting, there is changing, there is growth, there is evolution. How do we create the space that invites the unhoused, the addicted, the previously incarcerated? Because all of them should still feel welcome to show up. Michael A. Singer says, when you open, you bring more energy into the system, and it can heal. When you open, you bring more energy into the spiritual community, and it can heal. When you are open, you bring more energy into the planet, and it can heal. Energy can heal, and that's why love can heal. Breathe. You know what this is? Okay, so you know what it is. So there's a question that comes up referencing this, and I want to see if you know the connection. So oftentimes people will say, how often do I need to pray to get healed? How long do I need to meditate to get healed? What does my prayer need to be like? Like, what do I need to say in order to get what I want? What kind of meditation will produce the life that I want? That's what I want to know. Now, this kind of questioning regarding spiritual practices, I often refer to it as a microwave spirituality or microwave healing, because what we are looking for is that quick 30-second fix. Doot, 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 30 seconds and I'm healed. Boop, 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 60 seconds and I'm a millionaire. Boop, 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 20 seconds and I'm married in a relationship. We're looking for the quick, quick, fast, and in a hurry. But that's not the process, because there is no quick fix. Healing is a process that cannot be rushed. There is no shortcut. So this idea of trauma, there is no shortcut. There's no quick fix. It begins with our awareness. It begins with our moment by moment practice and navigating through. So when Marcia Senator says, self-acceptance gives us the strength to get better if we're ill and stay well if we're fit. The process of, this is what I'm experiencing. How do I maintain the good? How do I shift the not so good? So, for example, using prayer. How do I use spiritual mind treatment to maintain the health, the well-being, the prosperity? And if I'm not experiencing health, wellness, and prosperity, how do I use spiritual mind treatment, meditation, etc., to manifest it? Well, it begins with this level of self-acceptance. I have to be able to accept, this is what I feel, this is where I am, these are my habits, my feelings, my addictions, etc. Self-acceptance joins us together at the very point of rupture. That place where we are broken is where the light fit, where the light gets in, that place where the gold rejoins what has been broken. So when we ask the question, do you want to be healed or do you want to be healing? Note the process. Healed, boop, done. Healing, ongoing. And when you are being healing, then your presence is a healing presence to those you encounter. Both and. Dr. Holmes says, in this science, we believe that man's life, yes, it's gender specific for now, using his language. We believe that man's life is a drama which takes place on three planes: the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. We should have no objections to any form of healing, for anything that helps to overcome suffering is good. Whether it be a pill or a prayer, we believe in any method which produces results, for each has its place in the whole. Whatever gives us the capacity to be in that energy of healing, we welcome it. Now, Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage and all the people simply players. We are all players in this stage, on this stage that is life. Now, referencing that, if I ask you, you see a variety of people. Which is the truth? Which is the real person? Or are they not all aspects of the real person? See, we put on masks and we put on various things at various times for a variety of reasons. Sometimes we put on a mask to entertain. Sometimes we put on a character as part of a story to educate, to entertain. And sometimes we do it to avoid, to suppress pain, trauma. But we are all engaged in some way, shape, or form, this thing called acting. Right? All are we. Characters, actors, roles, masks, realities, facts, fictions, myths, and more. All are we. Both and are we. Intersections of multiple threads woven in a vast tapestry of life. So our invitation, specifically referencing this, is to have a very clear understanding that there is going to be the person you see. There is going to be behaviors that you see. And yet beneath the surface of the behavior, there very well is someone else doing something else. So the person who is showing externally the addiction, internally, beneath the surface, is doing this thing called addiction to avoid this pain, whatever that may be. So our invitation is to see both and. See the form, the function, and what is beneath and behind it. See the person and their divinity, both and. See their behavior, the effect, and the cause, both and. Because that's the only way we can truly practice a trauma-informed spirituality and trauma-informed relationship, is to recognize the both and. Whatever this behavior is an outpicturing of a mental equivalent. What is it? How do we navigate it? How do we address it? How do we move through the process of being, healing, regarding it. Tricia Hearsey says, resting, breathe. Resting is about the beginning process of undoing trauma. Resting is healing so that we can thrive and evolve back to our natural state, our divine state of ease, grace, and rest. How do you rest? How do you engage in this process of healing, this process of undoing trauma? What is it that you do that gives you the capacity to be in? Because rest is healing. Rest is resistance. And I know some of you might have an issue with that word. Resistance is not the enemy. Resistance is jargon. Because if I were to ask you, if you're walking down the street and someone jumps out of a van and tries to grab you, do you willingly go or do you resist? You resist. Resistance is jargon. So let's be clear that when we talk about rest and resistance, we are resisting toxic capitalism that says work, 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 and work some more, while denying yourself time to recharge. I resist, I deny that as my reality. No, I'm going to rest. When my body needs rest, I rest. When my mind needs rest, I rest. Rest is spiritual practice. Breathe. If you tell the real, raw, ugly truth in order to get to the rotten core of internalized white supremacy, what you put out into the world will be beyond transformational. It will be evolutionary. If you tell the real, raw, and ugly truth, facts regarding this rotten core of, then what you will put out into the world by your being, by your doing, will be even beyond transformational. It will be evolutionary. Breathe. Are you willing to tell that truth about all forms of trauma, systemic oppression, etc.? Are you willing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and only that which is true in order to transform, in order to practice that which is true, the whole truth, and only that which is true as it pertains to the divine? Is it true that many people in Flint, Michigan still do not have clean and healthy drinking water? Yes, it is true. But is it a capital T truth? No. But it is still true. It is true to their experience. It is true to their trauma. Now we are invited to take this truth, principle, spiritual, ethical, moral, equitable, and apply it to this to change that truth. Because when we know what science of mind and spirit is, when we practice it and when we live it as a way of life, we not only understand our wholeness, our perfection, and our completeness, but we gently practice what it means to embody this, even when, and possibly even especially when we feel anything but whole, perfect, and complete. We practice and we embody all of this in how we holistically engage in our healing and our daily living. It is how we seek therapy and prayer support, or join a support group, or take a walk, or take a nap. It is in all of the ways that provide us the capacity to care for all of the intersections and all of the aspects of ourselves, individually and collectively, be that physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, socially, and financially. We learn how to Be a healing presence in all of these areas, individually and collectively. Breathe. This week's declaration, I'll say it first, and if it aligns with you, if you agree with it, say it with me on the second go round. I am gentle with myself and the world, knowing we are all healing together. Together. I am gentle with myself and the world, knowing we are all healing together. Amen. This week's study questions. How has trauma impacted my life? How often do I tell the story of my trauma? Who do I tell my trauma story to? What is the reason I retell it? How am I healing by sharing it in the way that I am sharing it? Because oftentimes we tell the story and we don't realize that the way we are telling the story is keeping us stuck in the story. But the moment we start to dissect it and break it apart is when we realize, oh, let me shift this. What status quo practices at many centers are triggering, uncomfortable, and undesirable to me? Do I like being hugged or touched when I show up at a community? Do I like eating or partaking of the potlucks that are offered? Tracy's not. Do I like standing or being identified specifically as a new person or a visitor? What are the things, what are the practices that may be triggering or uncomfortable? How have I used and how am I invited to use science of mind and spirit principles to heal trauma in my life, my community, the world? And lastly, what action steps could my spiritual center, my spiritual community take to cultivate a more dedicated space for trauma or being trauma informed and healing? What could we do better to support you, to support one another? Breathe. Can we enter into that divine space knowing that beyond the trauma there is healing, there is wholeness, there is perfection, and there is completeness? And we need not deny or ignore or suppress the traumatic experiences or feelings in order to make use of or to access our wholeness, perfection, and completeness. We breathe knowing that there is space and capacity for the both and. And it is from this capacity and this space of the both and that that which is principle, that which is divine and capital T truth is the very thing that helps us to move through the healing of whatever the trauma is. The grief may not go away, but the grief may be softened. The tears may not stop, but they may be less frequent. We may still feel depressed, but we no longer shut down or shut others out. But it's still present. See, it's not about choosing. It's about both and. I know that I, me, myself, I am called Raymont. And what I am is beyond any name. As the divine, as the universe, I am all that it is named, unnamed, yet to be named, and can never be named. Both and. I am both an expression of that which is infinite, even though this form is finite. Both and. So knowing this energy and this practice, I step even further. I step more profoundly. I step in a great manner into the practice of trauma-informed spirituality that I apply to myself and my community, my practices, my relationships. I bring this awareness into all that I am and all that I do, knowing that that brings transformation and healing. It brings that which is the larger truth into the space. I'm Ray, and I am depressed. I feel depressed. I experience depression. And I am that I am ever becoming more and more of the truth of my being. I am the universe experiencing itself, breathing itself, living itself, loving itself. Even in the midst of the depression, the sadness, the grief, I am that which spirit is. And as I speak this of and for myself, I know that this same truth applies to all of us, no matter what it is. Hi, I am, and I am unhoused. And I am that which I am ever becoming more and more of, the divine expression of love itself, of God itself. Hi, I am, and I experience an addiction to gambling. And I am that which I am ever becoming more and more of, the flow of, the peace of, the joy of the divine, moment by moment, breath by breath, both and. And that which is the law says yes. And it manifests through us, in us, and as us accordingly. That our lives are the very demonstration of the truth that we know and the truth that we live. Whatever the traumatic symptoms or experiences may be, people pleasing, codependency, chronic and profound grief, whatever it is, no matter what it is, we hold them both. We transform, we heal, we listen, we express that which is the divine, that which is the healing, that which is the evolutionary impulse of and the evolutionary expression of the all that is. Right here and right now. It is already so. And so it is. Namaste and blessings, everyone. For those who are joining us over in Zoom, I will see you over there. And otherwise, I will see you either Wednesday or Thursday or next Sunday. Blessings and much love.